This conference will now be recorded.
All right. Thanks for joining us this evening, Mary. And Sloan, I will let you kick it off if you'd like to.
All right, that sounds good. Well, hey, everybody. Thanks so much for joining us for our webinar tonight. This is the third webinar in our series. And tonight we're just talking about getting back on track. But first, my name is Sloan. I'm on the community outreach team with Tony. And Tony, I'll kind of let you introduce yourself as well.
Hey, everybody. I'm Tony Vertle on our community outreach and education team here at DePaco. And Sloan and I are very excited this evening to be able to present to you on our crucial money topic here. So Sloan, I'll throw it back over to you. If you want to get us started on the material, I'll share my screen for us so we can get started.
Yeah, so really tonight, I mean, we're talking about getting back on track, and I think this is something that we can absolutely relate to, especially coming off of a year like 2020 where we saw so many unexpected things. I mean, we were in a global pandemic, parts of Iowa saw a derecho. Even right now we're seeing in 2021 extreme weather happenings. And so really a lot of people are not only shaken in their everyday lives, but especially financially shaken because these lead to unexpected costs and just changes in your routine. And you may be seeing, financial things come up right now that you haven't seen before, whether you lost power and so now maybe you're having to spend money on lodging and food or whatever it may be. And so we realized that now more than ever, it's really important to talk about not only how to get back on track when something happens in life that really kind of shakes up your world or your financial picture, but also how to prepare for that. And so that if that ever does come up, you feel like you are prepared for this and you're good to go and you're able to handle whatever comes your way. And we really thought this was super important because it was reported that 51% of Americans after the coronavirus outbreak hit felt really anxious about their financial situation. And that's a big number. I mean, we're talking about over half of Americans not feeling financially confident and secure after the pandemic. And so we truly feel that this is such an important topic to really dive into so that you have this information. And if you don't feel prepared now, you can start preparing for the future. But we wanted to break it down really to two mindsets. First, we want to talk about what it looks like to ideally prepare. So getting prepared if something does happen. And then at the end of the presentation, we're going to talk about how to handle it if you were finding yourself on the less prepared side of things and you're in a situation or a crisis and it's kind of financially shaking you, how to really pick yourself up from that. So we're going to talk about those two mindsets, but the first thing we're going to talk about is an ideal situation. And really the main thing we're going to talk about is setting up an emergency fund for yourself. So I know in previous webinars, we've talked about the importance of budgeting and just making sure that you're setting aside money every single month, you're saving for yourself. When we talk about an emergency fund or an emergency savings, this is a fund that is aside from your normal budget, aside from your normal savings. This is specifically a fund set aside in case something unpredictable comes up that requires some type of financial attention. And typically when you talk about an emergency fund, a good rule of thumb is to set aside about 6 months or 3 to 6 months worth of your expenses. So what you want to do for this is really look at your normal budget. And you want to see, roughly how much do I need in 1 month for expenses? You essentially want to multiply that by 3 to 6 to get that overall goal number. And so this slide kind of shows if you were to break down months worth of expenses, what your emergency fund size should be for 6 months. So you can see right here, I mean, this really takes into account, let's say you're not able to work for 6 months or your income changes if somebody in your household becomes laid off or maybe there's an accident, whatever it may be, you want to make sure that you have enough funds for 6 months to be able to still pay your regular bills and get through life. So this really breaks that down. But one thing that I will suggest that isn't really taken into account in this chart is that not only do you want to consider setting aside your monthly expenses that are outlined in your budget, I also recommend setting aside your deductible amounts for your major insurance that you have set up. So whether that be your health insurance, home insurance, car insurance, whatever it may be, you want to make sure that you have, if there are deductible amounts for your plan, in case you haven't met those for the year, you want to make sure that those are also taken into account for that emergency fund. Because if you're already in an emergency situation, you want to make sure that if something else doesn't come up, so if you're in this situation and let's say you have a hospital visit and you haven't met that deductible yet, that could be a large sum of money that we're talking about for a potential medical bill. So you want to make sure that you have that deductible amount set aside in addition to your emergency fund, because if not, that sum could severely tank your emergency fund, where before you thought you were covered for 6 months and now maybe you've only got 3 to 4. So you really want to pay attention to that and make sure that that's taken into account. And that's something that can be kind of glossed over a little bit as well. Now, one question that we get a lot in terms of an emergency fund is, when is it appropriate to actually use the funds in this emergency fund? And so really what we want to tell you is that your emergency fund really should only be used for expenses that truly are unpredictable. So we're talking about if you're suddenly unemployed and you lost your job and you no longer have that income coming through. Maybe you had a health emergency, and whether you had to have a surgery or something came up and you all of a sudden have a huge medical bill, that's something that's unexpected. You may have also had an accident. Maybe somebody in your family or your life passed away, unfortunately, and now you have to travel for bereavement. Whatever it may be, the key is that if it's truly unpredictable and not something that you could have planned for in your regular budget, that's when it's appropriate to then dive into that emergency savings. Now, on the other hand, we can kind of go to the next slide. These are things that are predictable and that you should be taking into account for your regular budget or your savings. So if you have a major car repair, you want to think about that this is something that you could technically plan for and set aside some money into your savings each month in case a car repair does come up. Same goes for home repairs, appliance replacement. If you know that your appliances are kind of getting old, or maybe you've had to do some small repairs on those before, you want to make sure that you are planning for that in advance, and set aside that money so that you don't have to dip into your emergency savings to replace those appliances. And same goes for electronics as well. Really, the key is that if you truly feel like you could have prepared for the expense, then you probably should not use your emergency fund to pay for those. If you know that some of these things are coming up, then try to budget in for those, and make sure that you're planning ahead of time and set aside that money so that you don't have to dive into your emergency savings. A lot of people will also ask, because especially when we talk about the first slide, they see that sum of money that they're really trying to save for that savings goal for 6 months. And depending on your income and how many people are in your household, that can be a lot of money. And I think that amount that we want to try to save for can really feel overwhelming. So it's really important that you kind of keep a couple things in mind when we're talking about saving. There are some really great ways to start building your emergency fund if you're feeling overwhelmed by it. First and foremost, we should talk about systematic savings. And we do have a calculator that we can pull up. We have a calculator on dupaco.com. It's called Saving for Life's What Ifs. This is a great calculator. You're able to kind of put in what your overall goal is for your rainy day fund or your emergency fund, how much you're spending monthly, how long you're trying to spend for that. And it truly breaks down how much you should be setting aside every month, and really breaks down how long it's going to take to get to your overall goal. So you can use this, but the key is just to start small. Don't let that overall goal amount make you feel overwhelmed. If you can only start saving maybe $10 a paycheck, or putting aside, like $20, $25 a month, start saving small and eventually get to that goal. As long as you start saving and you're intentional about it, over time, that amount is going to grow. And even if you're not to your full amount, at least you'll have a little bit of something set aside where if an emergency does come up, you still have a little bit set away that is able to kind of alleviate some of those unexpected expenses that start coming through. So you want to start thinking about whether or not you have the ability to systematically save and setting up something like that. You also want to, like I said, be intentional about saving. Don't let your emergency fund kind of fall to the back burner or, kind of stay out of your mind. I think it's easy to assume that, oh, well, I'm not going to need my emergency fund. I already have my regular savings. I'm already good at budgeting. You want to truly make sure that you are still saving because, again, coming off of a year like 2020, nobody thought that we would have faced all of the things that we faced, the global pandemic and businesses closing and widespread unemployment and people, maybe your hours were even cut and your income dropped. Whatever it was, I think that so many people didn't expect that coming. And so it's really easy to hope that it's not going to happen, but you really want to try to prepare for the worst and hope for the best. And so make sure that you're keeping this in your mind and you're not putting it off until something happens. You want to try to be proactive instead of reactive. You also want to be very patient. I know that this calculator is really good for kind of laying out how to save up for that amount and breaking it down. But a healthy emergency fund is going to take time. And there may be different points where you're able to add in larger sums than other points in your life. So for example, you might be putting away $10 a paycheck towards your emergency fund, but then let's say the holidays come up and you get a little bit of extra money. You might decide to put some of that in your emergency fund and kind of boost it. Or when tax refunds come out, you might choose to set aside some of your refund amount over into your emergency fund. So there might be different times where it's going to boost, but you need to realize it's going to take a little bit of time towards this. But again, every little bit helps. And so don't let the time that it's going to take to save discourage you from starting, because the sooner you start, you're going to have that compound interest and you're going to start to have a little bit of something. You want to be as prepared as you can, and a little bit is better than nothing. And then the last point I want to make is, just like your regular monthly budget, you want to make sure that you're accounting for changes into your budget in your emergency savings as well. So what I mean by that is, if your regular budget is going through changes, so let's say you had a baby, and so now your expenses are changing because of that, or your income changed, or you changed where you live, so now your cost of living expenses have started to change a little bit. You want to also make sure that your rainy day fund is reflecting those changes as well. Because if you created your rainy day fund and then 6 months later your expenses have changed, this may mean that now what your rainy day fund had before, which was 6 months worth of expenses, is now only going to cover maybe 4 to 5 months because your expenses have changed. So if your regular budget has changed, you also want to make sure that your emergency fund is reflecting those changes so it's still able to cover the amount of time that you need to cover. I don't know, Tony, do you have anything else to add in terms of setting up an emergency fund or what goes into it?
Yeah, I think you hit that great point. We're coming around to tax season right now, being here in February, coming into March, and hopefully people are getting good tax returns. And, if you have children, typically you get a little bit more back. So now is a great time to get yourself a little nest egg started. It's important, if it's a $500, if it's, $250, just something that you can be comfortable with knowing that you have that there. We certainly don't expect people to have these, $15,000, $20,000, as Sloan mentioned. That's going to take time. So right now I would say is make it a priority to put a little bit away if you can. Then Sloan, I know I'll let you keep going here. If you had a couple more thoughts, I apologize.
No, you're fine. I was actually going to pass it over to you because, like we said at the beginning, this is the ideal situation for you, right? When we're talking about preparing for a possible emergency situation, the ideal is that you have this fund, and ideally it's fully funded and it reflects your budget correctly, and so it's covering that amount of time you need it to cover. But I think what we ideally hope will happen doesn't always happen. And there's a lot of us that did find ourselves on the less prepared side of things this past year and even coming into 2021. And we understand life happens and we're not always prepared for it. But what we don't want you to feel is that if something does come up, that you don't have options to get through it and that you're out on your own. And so Tony is actually going to talk about, if you find yourself in that situation where you're not as prepared as you hoped you were, what are the options to get through on your own 2 feet and really make it through that trying time? So I'm just going to hand it back over to Tony.
Thanks, Sloan. Yeah, with 2020 happening, that's why we kind of came up with this, topic of kind of trying to get back on track and get your money back on track, because so many of us lost income. I know I myself did. My wife is in the medical industry, and um, they had her shut down for a while right at the beginning because things were slow. So, I think we all, in one way or another, saw some sort of financial strain. So, we're completely understanding that we don't expect you to have this emergency fund and DePaco, and if it is at another financial, hopefully they're there to help you out and be that support that you need from a financial standpoint. So, this is a little bit of maybe some older information, but some of it is definitely still prevalent today, even as we continue to deal with this pandemic going into 2021. So, we have things as this shows here for personal members, the stimulus payments, what can you do with those? How did they work? So we gave you some great information on that, some ways that DePaco can support you, connecting directly with us via phone, email, or in person. We wanted to help you. So we were right there for you through all this. We are still today, we will be in the future. And then some ways to start managing your money. So that's kind of, there's this great blog post that I just kind of want us to look over here. And like I said, this information is about a year old, but I still think it's very prevalent today. So it's the interview within this blog post was with one of our coworkers, Erin Engler. She had some great quotes within here. So I'm just going to kind of go through some things. Maybe you are living paycheck to paycheck right now. Maybe you are able to save that $5 to $10 a paycheck. We always say pay yourself first. That's really, really important to do. Even if it is $5 or $10, just try to put that into a savings. Try not to touch it. That's going to give you that feeling of success at the end of the 2 weeks. And then you can watch that grow over time, hopefully continue to put more into that. So the first thing right now really is to try to hold off on any major purchases, because with job markets and the volatility right now, you don't know if you're going to have a job tomorrow or not. Hopefully you will, but trying to stay away from buying that new car or going on a big trip. It's something we all want to do right now, especially since we haven't been able to travel. But, with that, when you get your tax return, instead of going to Mexico, maybe you just put that into your savings account and hold off on that trip a little bit longer. So that's one key point there. Another one is resist retail therapy. This one for me is hard because Amazon is so easy to purchase. It takes 2 seconds. They even have the buy it now option where you don't even have to put it in a cart. You literally hit buy it now and it's at your door 2 days later or the next day. So it's crazy. And Erin has a great quote here. She says, we're really in unknown territory. Even if you aren't necessarily struggling financially, it's really good to try to live a little bit more frugal just to prepare for what's ahead. So I think that's a great quote there and something to kind of live by. So, it can help improve our mood doing some retail therapy, some retail shopping, but it's important to remember that when you're online, you can buy so quickly instead of in a store where you can kind of pick something up. You're like, do I really want to spend this or not? I would maybe set your phone down, think about it for a while, and then go back and make that purchase if it's something that really is necessary. Another one here is practice the pause. And I think we've all heard this one quite a bit. I know our great leader, Deb Schrader, says this one quite often, practice the pause. I think that's really important. We need to consider what our needs are right now, our needs and our wants. And I think that's where this comes into play. We need to make sure that we're figuring out where that budget's at and making sure we're living within our means and figuring out exactly what's important and what isn't important to us right now. In evaluating other expenses. So I know we've chatted about this in a few other of our webinars here, but what do you have for streaming services out there? What do you have for subscriptions? Can you get on a less expensive phone plan? Can you cut down food costs? Maybe try to go out to eat a little bit less. So there's some great questions here to really ask yourself and dive in. Where can you save money each month? Instead of going out to eat all the time, eating in is such a great one. That's probably my favorite on this list. That's where I slip up the most. So, and then finally, boosting your savings and taking advantage of financial relief are the last two here. So boosting your savings, obviously, if you can, it's great to be able to save. There's some options here. Look at doing kids activities at homes, cutting your own hair, make travel a little bit, less frequent. All of those things can help boost your savings because you're not spending chunks of money there. And then the last one is taking advantage of financial relief. I know at DePaco, we did some awesome things for our members. We had some member relief loans that we were offering last year, and we're still here for you today. Whether that be looking at maybe consolidating some debt that you have out there, maybe you racked up a few credit cards. We'd love to sit down with you, take a look at those credit cards or whatever debt, maybe you had to take out a personal loan. We want to help you. We truly do get you into that situation where you can see light at the end of the tunnel. That's kind of my saying for 2021. It's bright. You know, we want to get to that next level, get that sunshine out there and see that light at the end of the tunnel. So as your financial, we're here. We offer money makeovers. We'd love to sit down with you if you're a member or non-member, go through what happened in 2020 with you individually, see what we can do to make your situation better for 2021. So that's just kind of some information we have out here on our website. Once again, this is under our blog section. We do still have a COVID-19 section. Financial relief is where I was at. And then we also have a lot of great information under our learn section here as well. So I did get a note here that Mary is stating that she can't hear anything. Can you guys hear me okay? Okay. We'll send a message here to Mary at the end, but well, that's the information that I had. Sloan, did you have any more thoughts here on kind of what DePaco has done for our members, or just kind of that financial relief piece?
No, I think you did a great job kind of hitting on the resources that we have. And I think the most important thing, I know we've mentioned this in our previous webinars, but we truly are here to help you. We never want you to feel that if you're going through a situation that you can't come into DePaco and say, hey, can somebody just please sit down with me and go over my situation and talk about next steps or create a game plan. We're always here for that, and we never want you to feel intimidated because, you know, life is throwing you a curveball. That's exactly what we do, and especially our team, because we're on the outreach team, we're so flexible, and we always say we'll meet you where you are. So if you're not able to get into a branch, but you know, I'd really love to sit down with somebody and just talk about options or talk about what's going on and get some advice, we're here for that. And so please feel free to reach out to us. We'd love to set up a meeting, even if it's outside of branch hours. That's exactly what we're able to do. So just know that we're here for you in case you ever need somebody to kind of help you through something that you're going through. But that's everything that we had planned. If you have any final questions, we'll definitely stick around for a few more minutes and answer those, or you can pop them in the chat as well. But we just want to thank you so much for hopping on for this webinar tonight. And we do have one more webinar this month that we're planning. Next week, we will be here at Thursday at 7 o'clock again, and we're going to have Ask Us Your Money questions. And so this is really your chance to bring your random financial questions to us. We'll have a panel of 3 staff. It'll be myself, Tony, and then our coworker, Crystal. And so we're here to answer all of those different questions that you might have, no matter what the topic is. So it'll be a great Q&A session, and we hope that you can hop on for that. But that's everything that we have. So we'll stick around for any questions if there are any. Thank you.